You're listening to Rhythms of Grace, a podcast of Grace Fellowship Church in McClenny, Florida, with pastors Nathaniel Simmons and Joel Griffis. To find out more about Grace Fellowship Church, visit www.gfcbaker.org. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome. Oh, I said welcome. Welcome to another episode of Rhythms of Grace. I'm Joel Griffis, and I'm joined as always by the Reverend Dr. Nathaniel Simmons, and we've got Miss June Simmons here again to say hello and to answer some questions for us. I've got a question actually that we didn't talk about beforehand, but I'm thinking about the fact that school season has started back. I think sort of for everybody in our county. I know people go different places, but June, has that something that started for you now, going back to school?
School is actually going to start tomorrow for me.
Oh, okay, very good. So you got a couple. A lot of kids started back yesterday, which is Monday. So you got a couple of days extra of summer before you started back school. That's a good thing.
Are you excited about it?
I am excited about it.
June and I are having to share this headphone, so it's upside down so she can hear it. That's why our heads are glued together.
Yeah.
June has been... Are you getting bored now being at home?
Kind of.
We're trying to ramp up the chore list so that there will be an excitement to finally get away from the house. So,
I want to get away from the house today because it's the last day of summer for me.
Today's the last day of summer.
It's always very sad.
What grade are you going to be in?
5th.
I already knew that, didn't I?
5th grade.
5th grade.
If you didn't know, I would kind of be a little mad.
No, I know.
Yeah, he's not a Nate Bargatze style father who doesn't know anything about his kids' schooling.
Joel and I, one of our favorite comedians, talks about how the principal calls him and says, "Hey, your kid needs to get picked up," and he's like, "Who is this? What school does my kid go to?" And he's like, "Why didn't you just call my wife? She knows this stuff." So it's kind of funny. Anyway, June, Joel and I are going to talk about books today. And you like to read books, but you also like to listen to books. And so I thought you might tell everybody what book you listen to. There's a Bible story. Dorothy, you want to come and say hi to everybody? Dorothy's standing off to the side.
We'll just wave.
Anyway, June, what do you listen to at night? And tell us how you listen to it. Tell us what you told Joel a little bit ago.
I listen to the Child's Story Bible, and I used to just pick the first chapters and stuff, but now I just scroll through the thing and just pick a random chapter.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's great. See. Keeps it, you get a variety of different kinds of stories that way. You never know what you're going to get.
Share this picture somehow.
Is that a digital thing, like on a device, or is it a physical book?
I am going to try to do a little screen share thing if I can. Oh, that didn't do it.
That just turned
Let's
off the
see.
camera.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead,
screen
give it a
share.
shot.
Okay, allow. Let's see if you can see.
I see it.
All right, so this is the Child's Story Bible. Catherine Voss. It was written back in 1935.
Oh, wow.
And it was the original, not really the original, but one of the original story Bibles. And it was Billy Graham kind of promoted it. Well, Ruth Graham Bell does, Billy Graham. I'm just reading some of the description of it here on the Amazon list.
I think it's the best audible book in the world.
June thinks it's the best audible book in the world. So She originally did it in 1935. It was edited a little bit by her daughter later on, so they've added a few extra things. We do not have the print book. So our storybook Bibles that we have in print are more modern. There's one that we have by Kevin DeYoung and a couple others that we have that we like. But this one we got on Audible. And she listens to it every night. And for a while, she said, well, tell us about how you listen to different things now. So how do you choose what you're going to listen to?
I just scroll up and down, and I get to a random number and just press it.
Yep. So you just find a random chapter and just start wherever you want. It used to be that you would start in Genesis every single time.
Yeah.
So let's see. The Audible book is 20 hours and 15 minutes. So obviously longer than you're going to listen to at night before bed. But to help her fall asleep, she'll just scroll to whatever Bible story she wants to listen to and just start listening until she falls asleep. And there's plenty of information there to get her into dreamland.
For some
That's a
reason,
great way.
I keep accidentally pressing like the chapter where Joseph gets like thrown into the well and gets like in the slave, I think.
Yeah, Joseph gets
Yeah.
sold into slavery by his brothers.
And I've been listening to that one, but I'm not meaning to listen to all of that. I just accidentally keep pressing the same chapter.
All right, I'm going to go talk with Joel. You go have fun.
Bye, Jeansy.
Will you shut the door?
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff.
So
that's a great
there
way to fall
is-
asleep, listening
Yeah,
to
I
a
know.
Bible story.
So that's a preview. We'll talk more about books later, but that's June's. I will tell you this. I do love audiobooks for my girls and for myself falling asleep. It is my brain at night. I can't always shut it down, but a good book will put me to sleep.
I heard John Piper one time recommend reading like Numbers or Leviticus when you go to sleep, because obviously it's one of the more boring parts of the Bible to read. I say that with all reverence, but I mean, we know this. And so, but if you do fall asleep while you're reading, it's not a bad thing. You're reading
So
the
the
Bible.
same way. I will say in my experience, the book can't be too exciting or too boring. It has to be kind of in this middle ground. If it's so boring that I don't listen to it at all, then it's not helpful. I mean, background noise, I guess, is okay. But I do kind of like need to kind of listen so that my brain is thinking about that and not the other million things that may be going on. So I find it can't be wild, action packed. It can't be loud. It has to be kind of quiet, but interesting enough. I listen to quite a bit of like C.S. Lewis. He'll put me to sleep. I like him. He's interesting, but the Four Loves, it doesn't take 2 paragraphs before I'm out.
Yeah.
So things like that. I find that to be a cool modern convenience that we can benefit from.
Well, Lewis may come up later on in our conversation today.
I bet he
We'll
will.
see.
All right,
we haven't
well-
talked to really. So my idea for this episode today was for us to just talk about, and I was just going to title it "Books We Like," and I had picked out 3 books that I like in no particular order or for no particular reason other than just that I like them and wanted to say why I liked them. And so I have 3 books to share. You kind of maybe had a different idea in mind for this, which is fine. We'll just like go with however the conversation goes. But you know, whether it's books that you have or certain kinds of books or even resources. You mentioned having maybe a teaching resource in there somewhere. But it's really I'm going to leave as far as what you say today and how you contribute to the conversation. I'm just going to leave that up to you. I'll kind of do what I had planned to do, and we'll just see how it all converges. I've not shared with you ahead of time like what my 3 books are. You haven't really told me specifics about what your content is. And so basically it's just books we like or resources we like and want to talk about and recommend today. That's how I see this moving forward.
Do all
Sound good?
Christians need to read books?
Not all Christians can read books.
That's right. That's right. So
That's a good question, though. I mean, it's obviously something that we value and would want to encourage. I mean, our whole culture and society is built around valuing learning how to read, and I think as Christians, we certainly want to know how to do that. First and foremost, to know how to read God's word, but also all the other treasures of wisdom and knowledge that are found just in other books as well. Other books written by Christians, other books written by maybe people who aren't Christians, but people who have studied the world and learned about it in ways that can be valuable to us as Christians.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Let me adjust my camera for a second. Sorry, that's kind of distracting. I don't know.
The caveat to it that I think maybe you were getting at, I don't know, but
No, I'm not getting anything. I'm just trying to
that
be awesome, provocative, and cool.
No, it's a great question, but I do think it's okay if not everybody is like into books to the same degree. Like not everybody's going to have kind of a literary mind that enjoys sitting down and reading a book to the same degree, and I think that's okay. I think sometimes people might feel guilty that they're not better readers or don't do more reading. And, be challenged in however the Lord might challenge you in your own heart. Maybe you do need to be challenged to read more, but also don't cross into the, feeling overly guilty in like an unnecessary or unhelpful way. If you're just not as wired in that way as other people are, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I think that, like you said, most Christian history, a large percentage of Christians were illiterate. I don't know how large. It has always been a value of Christianity to teach people to read because the Bible is written. God gave us his word in written language. And I really believe that, there's that verse about that the kingdom of heaven is like a seed that's planted into the ground, and then it forms into a tree. And when it's grown, the birds of the air rest in its nests, rest in its branches. The kingdom of heaven basically is that seed that the birds would have loved to destroy. And I think the birds are the nations, the world, everybody around us would have loved to destroy the church. They hate the church. However, as the church has grown, come to find out it's blessed the world along the way. And now it's like, we hate it, but we're actually happy to rest in its branches. One of the branches of Christianity, I think, is literacy. That because we valued reading the Bible, we made it an effort to have schools to make sure that every kid is able to read. We've made it an issue to get the Bible in everybody's hand. When people couldn't afford books, it was the one book we're going to make sure everybody has an access to is the Bible. And nowadays, the world's changed a lot. Almost everybody in the first world and in the United States can read. People can afford books in ways they couldn't. But a lot of that comes down to Christians believing that God's word is written down and we want to get it in people's hands. Mm-hmm. At the same time, in that process, we also made it a priority to speak the word so that people who couldn't read could hear it taught, could hear it read out loud, could have it come to them in auditory form. So we do believe that the hearing of the word is weighty and powerful. And while it's an advantage for you to be able to read it yourself, that's you should go to church and you should hear it preached. But also I'm cool with audiobooks, and there are other ways to get it into your soul other than you opening an actual written book. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And just the convenience of when you're driving in the car, being able to listen to the Bible on audio, or, an audiobook or a podcast, something that is, able to speak truth into your heart, not by you reading something necessarily, and not through your eyes, but through your ears.
Do you have a feeling about written books being better than audiobooks, or the other way around?
I don't. I saw an interesting video on YouTube about it. Somebody kind of talking about the difference. In one respect, I think they are the same, because how do you say it? I don't know. You're taking in the same content. You're taking in the same words. The same words are going into your mind or crossing over your mind. You're considering the same words, whether they come audibly through your ears or through your sight from words on a page. But it is also just like mechanically, in terms of what your body is doing, it is a different task. And that's what the video kind of dug into, is how those different ways of taking in information will actually contribute to the ability to recall it. Typically when people read something on a page, they're able better to recall the information later, which makes sense to me and seems to be consistent with my own experience. But I just think there's a place for both, and actually what I really like to do sometimes is both at the same time. So I like to listen to the audiobook while I'm looking at it physically. And
Amazon has made that really helpful now because they link Kindle books and Audible books so that they're playing the Audible reading and the pages.
I really
scrolling.
like that. I'd be interested and hopeful that like that form of book may become more popular in
They do that
the
a lot
future.
with their classics. I think that one thing I would add to that is that the quality of the audiobook is going to affect how you listen to it. And
Sure, yeah.
the reason that is,
Similar to
and
the
what I
way
mean is the quality of the reader.
The font of a book may have an effect on how much you enjoy a book,
Yeah, but I think in a little bit different way. So when a book goes from written word to spoken word, there's actually a part of the interpretive process is already happening. Because when you read, you inflect, you'll end the sentence like a question or like a statement. The way I use my tone of voice is interpretive. So when you just have it on a text, you have to do that work yourself. When somebody else is reading to you, even though it's the same words, they're actually, by their tone of voice, their pace, their inflection, their just general demeanor as they read. Do they read as one that is reading something with passion and wildness, or do they read it as a informational text? All of these things are part of how you take that into you, how you receive that. And same material, but you can find that it will affect you differently by different readers. That's why I think the Harry Potter series has now 3 different audiobook series. And somebody might say, well, this one is the creme a la creme, or I like this one, or I like that one. Because you get a slightly different experience based on the reading of it. And that experience isn't radically different, but it's different enough that you may say, man, the way he read that captured the emotion. That's really basically why people would watch Shakespeare plays by different actors and say, which one really captured Hamlet in this? Because Hamlet has to be interpreted when you read it out loud. You can't. It's not just the words that Shakespeare wrote; it's the way they're delivered. That's part of the interpretive process.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. People talk about the difference between the way movies tell stories versus how books tell stories, and movies with the visual medium can tell stories in ways that books can't. And I'm sure, vice versa as well. And even video games now, people have kind of recognized that interactive media like a video game can tell stories in ways that other mediums can't. So it's all very interesting.
Anyway, I'll tell you one other plus on reading or listening just in general. I feel like there's one thing to say, do you have to read as a Christian? But why would you want to read as a Christian? So let's get away from the have to, don't have to. But to what benefit do you see out of it? Here's maybe a silly one for you. You might say, well, this isn't the best one, but it's a silly one. I like it. It makes you an interesting person. Interesting people.
And who doesn't want to be an interesting person?
That's right. Interesting people, I've heard it said before, are people who are interested in things.
Yeah.
Right. So like the more you walk around the world and you see it as something worthy of your attention and interest and delight, that this is cool, that makes you interesting. The key to being interesting is being interested. If I'm interested in you, that makes me likable. If I'm just interested in the world around me, if I see a bug and I'm like, that's a bug, I step on it, boring. If I see a bug and I'm like, that has 8 legs, not 6 legs. That has wings, that whatever. Then all of a sudden you're like, for me, listening to you talk about bugs, I'm like, maybe I've missed something about bugs. Maybe bugs are neater than I thought, all because you're interested in them. So what books do is they give us access to people who find things interesting and allow us to be able to gain interest in those things that otherwise were somewhat outside of our areas of interest. And so they're invitations to seeing the world, Christian world, if we're going to talk about Christian books, as a more interesting place, a place that has more things to be fascinated about, curious about, there's more conversations to be had than we ever realized. And I just think life's more fun when you're interested in it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, I don't know if I have anything else. You have anything else on reading
No.
before we talk about
You want to be an
actual
interesting
books?
person, be a reader.
Be a reader.
Yeah, and I just would add just and it goes along with it really, but just the expanding of your mind, the value, and especially as Christians, being able to read people who have been dead for many, many years and yet will still bring you to tears by their words. I mean, I think of somebody like Charles Spurgeon, who knows how many of his sermons I've read now. And the more that I read him, it's like the more I view him almost as a friend, like somebody that I know, who is, who speaks truth to me in ways that are powerful. And it's crazy that can happen despite the fact that he died in 1893 or whatever. Like he lived over 100 years ago, died over 100 years ago, and is still has this communicative relationship with me through his words. I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I do too. Reading allows you to step outside of your immediate culture. And I can get to know people that I would have never rubbed shoulders with in my normal day-to-day life. And that's a pretty incredible opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'll get us started today.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and talk about my first book in this collection of 3 books that I like. And then once I'm done with my first book, I'll just kick it over to you, and you do whatever you want, whether that's a book or a resource or however you want to do it today. But so my first book is going to be, and this might sound familiar to some people because back when we were doing pastoral book recommendations, I believe this might have been my first recommendation, but I wanted to revisit it today. My first book is The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. And it looks backwards on my screen, but
No, it
maybe
looks right to me.
It looks good. Okay, good. The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. I probably read this when I was 19 or 20 years old.
Hey, let me interrupt you real
Sure.
quick. Are we going to put links to all of these things in the video notes or something?
We should.
So if somebody wants to
That's a good
find
idea.
it on Amazon, maybe we'll do that. Amazon or ChristianBook.com or.
Yep. Great
All
idea.
right.
We'll do
Anyway,
it.
I'm sorry. That was not really important to interrupt your flow of thought. But
No,
go
you're
ahead.
good. You're good. So I read this when I was probably 19 or 20, when God was just doing a work in my own heart and really, really taking me deeper into His Word and just reflecting on who He is and who I am as a believer and all those things. That was just a time in my life when God was maturing me spiritually to a great degree, I feel like. And so I read this at that time, and my overall reaction to it was just how consistently it made me feel like my thoughts of God that I had for so long were really very, very small. And He just sort of broke through the limitations that I was putting on God and not really realizing it in the way that I thought about God. And it's like the first thing you read in the book. It's the first words of chapter 1. Like many great books, the first line of the book will oftentimes be the most quoted. You think about, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. What is that? Tale of Two Cities by Dickens or something?
I think so.
in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Everybody knows that. That's the Hobbit. But anyway,
You're impressing me right now.
but this is another book that falls into that category because Tozer, at the very start of chapter 1, he says, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us." And so this whole book is really, what should you think about God? How should you think about God? And it's really a book about the attributes of God. That's a term we use sometimes when we're really just talking about God's characteristics, what he is like. And so there's 20-something chapters in the book. Each one is devoted to a different attribute of God, essentially his eternity or his immutability, the fact that he's unchanging, his omniscience, wisdom, faithfulness, goodness, grace, mercy, love, holiness, sovereignty. And those are just part of them. And it's not a very long book. You can see it's very skinny. It's about 120 pages. And there's like 20-something chapters. So every chapter is just a few pages long. But it's very dense in terms of just the depth of truth that he gets into. And so it's very easy to read like one chapter a day, kind of folding it into your devotions or quiet times, things like that. And I think you'll probably get a lot of benefit out of it. To whoever may end up reading this, I think they will get a lot of benefit out of it. I'll give one more kind of representative quote, and this is just kind of representing the way, and I think I quoted this in a sermon a few years back, but Tozer says, "God is as high above an archangel as above a caterpillar. For the gulf that separates the archangel from the caterpillar is but finite, while the gulf between God and the archangel is infinite." And that was just like one of the things that when I first read it, just blew my mind and made me realize how much I was bringing God down and thinking, it's almost like in my mind, I would have thought of God as, just a little bit over an archangel. I mean, you think about an archangel, that's a glorious and great being that God created. But in reality, God is as high above an archangel as an archangel is above a caterpillar. And even more so because God is infinitely above the archangel. And so in so many different ways.
He's just categorically different. Because
Right,
you're talking degrees of goodness above how far over an archangel is or over a caterpillar is an archangel. You're talking about degrees there. But when you get to infinitely higher, which is true, you're not even able to measure it in degrees anymore. So you're just talking about he's categorically in a league of his own. That's a pretty fascinating idea.
The word holy in itself means set apart. It means different. It means other than. He's in a category entirely his own. And so that's A.W. Tozer, The Knowledge of the Holy. I recommend it. It's not like Old English, but it is a little bit, Tozer can be a little bit flowery in the way he speaks. So it might sound, it's not written in like casual everyday language, but I think that's fitting for his subject matter, thinking about the holiness of God. And so I love the book and highly recommend it.
All right. My turn?
Sure.
That book that you just shared, I would describe as being theology proper. What I mean by that, it's a study of not everything we believe about all Christianity, but specifically what do we believe about God, right? So that's what is meant by theology proper. Theology means the study of God, and we often use that word to say everything pertaining to God and Christian life. But theology proper is specifically about the study of God. This book that I'm going to show you is just everything about everything that is theological.
Nice.
And this, I believe, is the first edition. Not like actual first edition, like it's worth money. It's not worth any money, but there's been
When
several
was that
things and updates.
Originally published in the 80s?
This is 1994, and it does appear to be the first edition.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so
I've got a newer edition, but say what it is first. You've shown it, but
I do too. So systematic theology. I'll tell you the story behind me getting this. First off, like, this is just kind of interesting. I don't know if you can see.
Did you say the author? I can't remember, but it's Wayne Grudem.
Wayne Grudem. Yeah. When we link to it, you'll get a new copy. It won't be this. But I'll tell you why I have this and the story behind it. But you can even see some of the old guys. Chuck Colson, J.I. Packer wrote about it. Paige Patterson, who probably wouldn't be endorsing books anymore. A few other guys. But anyway, just to give you an idea of the age of the book. There was a little Christian bookstore near my house that just sold tons of these kind of old, more academic, but I didn't know that at the time. I mean, I think I was like in college, and it just looked like a really niche style Christian bookstore, and they would put these big books on these huge sales. So I think I came in and saw this thing for like $5 or something, and I'm like, I'll pick it up. And it was one of the first. It was like early on in me getting Christian books. I'm like, this thing looks like it has a lot of information on a lot of topics, but it is not the kind of book that I was going to just sit down and read, because it's just a bunch of little sections. So I'll give you, I don't know if you can see it, but so bad place to open it up to, because I opened it up to it. And so each chapter will have a main focus, and then within the chapter, there'll be smaller focuses with little questions. And then he'll write like a page and a half or a page, maybe sometimes less, like here's a half a page, on a certain little question within a question. So what do we believe about God the Father? Well, what do we believe about God the Father? Like, he was never made. What do we mean that he was never made? He's a spirit. What do we mean that he's a spirit? So there's like a little paragraph about every little thing. So it doesn't read like a story. It doesn't read like a book. It's not like this will be super fun, easy reading, right? But I still thought every question is there. I'll just have it. It'll be a resource. A few years later, I'm leading a Bible study, and some girl in that Bible study asked me if Jesus went to hell when he died. And I remember thinking, I have never thought about that question in my life. And so I had heard that there's a confession. I'm still like early on in my relationship with the Lord. I do remember hearing that he died and went to hell, but I don't know. So I'm like, I think so, but let me go try to find something, and I'll get back with you later. So I go home and I pull this book off the shelf, and I just start looking. Does it have anything there? And it has like 2 pages on whether or not Jesus went to hell when he died. So it has arguments for, arguments against, his position on it. And it gave me really like a 2-page overview of the different views. And I call her back with that. This is like before text messaging is this. And I'm like, all right, this is what I found out. And Wayne Grudem argued that his conclusion is that Jesus did not go to hell. And so he convinced me. As time has gone on, I've gotten more of these kind of books. So you can see different people making different arguments. But this was so well organized and laid out that I thought almost any question that somebody brings to me, whether it be later on in life, my kids, or somebody in a small group, or somebody just in life, if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer to, chances are I'm going to get a pretty helpful answer in this book. And so I've used this. In seminary, we had to read through a newer edition all the way through. But I mostly use this as a resource for finding answers to questions I don't know. And I think almost every Christian ought to have a copy so that when their kids ask them a question they don't know, when they put their kids to bed, they can say, I'll look up the answer while they're sleeping. And tomorrow I'll have a good answer. It's just such a helpful thing.
While we eat breakfast tomorrow, I'll have the answer. But no, I couldn't agree more about Grudem. It's probably, I mean, there are other systematic theologies too that I'm sure are good. I haven't read many others though. But Grudem is just always the one that I come back to. And if there's something unfortunate about the book, it is the fact that it's just so gigantic that in itself, when people see it, might turn them off to it. Like,
that's right.
Without even reading what's in it, you might just look at it and think, oh, that book's definitely over my head. But what you said is exactly right. It's all broken up into very, very digestible sections that is organized very like an encyclopedia, in a way that you can just look up whatever topic it is that you're interested in and find a good overview of that topic. So
if you have this, your kids will think, man, he knows everything. If you just look up their questions while they're sleeping.
Yeah. I often wonder, like, for somebody like Wayne Grudem writing a book that big, I mean, do you think he even remembers everything he himself wrote?
I know. Well, and he's written a couple other books like it that are these encyclopedias.
He's got an ethics book that is about the same size, and a politics book that is about the same size.
He kind of has a makeup that makes him enjoy encyclopedia writing.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he does. He writes miniature encyclopedias that are related to the Christian worldview. And he's really good at it. And so there's multiple systematic theologies. A lot of them are written more flowing, a little bit more like we'll give you articles on topics. But in this real punchy encyclopedia kind of way that I find incredibly helpful, he's pretty unique. Recently, John MacArthur and I can't remember who was with him, but there's a whole group of people that published one called, I think it's either Bible Doctrines or Biblical Doctrines. It's similar, it's good. And then Millard Erickson had one that was really good as well. But I do like MacArthur's a lot, but I still kind of I'll probably always love Grudem's because it was the first one, and I've just found it so helpful over the years. It's the only one I've read all the way through because we were required to. Most of the rest of them I look up a little bit here and a little bit there.
But I was doing a Sunday school class one time years ago where I wanted to do an overview of different views of eschatology, kind of like where we've been the past couple of weeks. But I just basically worked through Grudem's content for a few weeks because he laid out every single view, and I thought did a fairly good job representing each view, which is very rare. It's rare for an author who doesn't hold to certain views describe those views in a way that feels very fair to them and is actually kind of convincing. Like I actually felt a little bit more convinced by one of the views that Grudem represented, which was not his own view. Yeah. So
they call that steel manning. So a straw man is when you set up somebody in an unfair way so you can knock them down really easily. Like Joel believes hats are good, and I'm like, Joel is something silly, and I just make up like a version of your argument that is just obviously silly, and I leave out every good part of your argument and only do the negative part, and then I tear it down. I'm like, look how stupid Joel is. Well, that's straw man argument. Steel man is when you do the very best of their argument and make it look as great as possible before you present another option that you may or disagreements. And I think that he has a tendency of steel manning, given the best version of arguments that he disagrees with. And maybe a problem, we talked about this the other day, maybe a problem with preaching is that often we straw man our opponents because we don't want anybody to go that direction. So we mock it. And he is, I think, an example of somebody that does his best not to do that, to give the most fair and actually charitable interpretation of every view, whether he agrees or not.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, can I piggyback on that one before we move to a different thing? So let's say you want to know systematic theology, but this is totally overwhelming. Here is another way to go about a little bit of everything. I'm going to try to share this as well. There is a 60 lecture series by R.C. Sproul called Foundations. Let me see if I can share this real quick. Here it is. This is on YouTube. Can you see it says Foundations and Overview of Systematic Theology?
Yep.
You can pay for this on Ligonier's website and you get the full video of it. But these are just the audio recordings of them. And I actually years ago got them on Audible, but they don't sell it on Audible anymore. And I will listen to them when I'm mowing. But if you have YouTube, especially like YouTube Premium, so you're not getting commercials, you can just listen to him take all of the information that would be in a systematic theology and put it into 30-minute lectures, which I find them to be really, really, I like the way Sproul teaches. I find them interesting. If you want an overview of the fundamentals of what Christians believe, that would be basically, it's 60 30-minute lectures, or really 25. So 60 30-minute lectures, that makes, what is that? 30 hours of listening. And you can do that over a period of time. You will have an overview of the Bible, but it won't be like reading an encyclopedia. It'll be listening to somebody. It's audio. It's very easy to do while you're mowing or driving somewhere. And so that I put the picture up later, but we can link to the YouTube playlist there later on in the show notes.
Yeah, that's great. I remember being in college in between classes, and I'd go to the computer lab and just watch R.C. Sproul lectures, and that was fun. I got a lot from R.C. Sproul.
He'll come up again for me. I love Sproul, but I do think that a lot of people will say, I'm just not going to read an encyclopedia of Christianity.
Yeah.
But I see the value of it, but I'm not that kind of guy. And so I think this is so accessible. It's still pretty dense. It's a lot of material, but it's in bite-sized chunks. You can listen for 30 minutes on your drive, and you will get some big ideas in bite-sized pieces. And some of them, you'll say, some of them are more easily digestible than others, but it's a good way. It's a good way to get an audio version of a theology in your brain.
And I'm just going to piggyback very briefly, but Sproul also has Everyone's a Theologian.
Oh, yeah.
This is a lot shorter than Grudem, you can tell, but it is split into very small chapters, which it looks like every single chapter is like 4 pages. So they gave kind of each chapter a strict word limit, it looks like, because every chapter is just a different topic of theology that probably follows more or less the flow of how Grudem lays things out, but in a much more succinct, digestible way.
I bet that book is a republishing of an older book called 29 Essential Questions of the Christian Faith, which when I was in high school, I went to a Christian high school, and we had to write a theology paper. So every senior had to write a 20-page paper, which was 10 2-page papers just put together, right? So throughout the whole year, we wrote 10 2-page papers on 10 different doctrines of the Bible. We could choose. Some of them were chosen for us, and some of them we could choose. And basically, I had his book, 29 Questions, and I just picked 10 of them, and I used them as my guide. I also had one other book that I used, and a great introduction for a high school student who really was at that time not interested in those kind of things, but it was good. It was punchy. It was easy to read. And it was enough that a high school student, not a good grade high school student either. So me, was kind of interested in it. I liked it. I thought it was very accessible. So I recommend that book.
Very good. All right.
All right, your turn.
Move on to my second book I like for the week. And that is, I mentioned that C.S. Lewis would come up, and here he is with The Business of Heaven.
What?
Now, technically, this is not a C.S. Lewis book proper, maybe, but it is actually a compilation of a lot of selections from C.S. Lewis and different books of his, like Mere Christianity, or The Problem of Pain, or The Four Loves, or The Great Divorce. Every single reading, it's all broken into 365 readings, one for every day of the year. Some of them are a little lengthier. But like the longest ones might be like 2 pages. Others might just be 1 paragraph. So they're all very short, all very easy to kind of fold into a quiet time. And it's basically a highlight reel of C.S. Lewis. And I like that. Because as much as I love C.S. Lewis and as much as I quote him all the time, I do find that his books as a whole, if you try to read like The Problem of Pain or something like that, you will find many good things in it, but it will also be kind of hard at times because, and maybe it's just me, but Lewis's points are not always super easy to grasp immediately. And so this is kind of a way to cheat by getting all of the best C.S. Lewis without doing as much of the work. So you get just a good little dose of C.S. Lewis for each day of the year. So I read through it. I didn't stick to a strict like once a day plan. I would read a few a day here and there, but I did end up getting all the way through this book, and I just loved it. There's just so much to highlight and make note of. There's something one that I have highlighted here that I'll read real quick if I can find it. Yeah, this is about, so I forget which C.S. Lewis book this is from, but it's just a selection from one of his books. But he says, one of the great difficulties is to keep before the audience's mind the question of truth. And so he's thinking in terms of speaking to skeptics, people who don't believe. He says, they always think you are recommending Christianity, not because it is true, but because it is good. And in the discussion, they will at every moment try to escape from the issue of true or false into stuff about the Spanish Inquisition or France or Poland or anything whatever. You have to keep forcing them back and again back to the real point. Only then will you be able to undermine their belief that a certain amount of religion is desirable, but one mustn't carry it too far. One must keep on pointing out that Christianity is a statement which, if false, is of no importance, and if true, is of infinite importance. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important. And that line always makes me chuckle a little bit. I remember seeing a C.S. Lewis production, or maybe it was a trailer of one of the C.S. Lewis productions they do, where it's like a man on a stage, basically. Well, we saw the Screw Tape Letters a while back, but there's another one where it's Lewis himself on stage, not Lewis himself, but an actor portraying Lewis that is kind of sharing different quotes from Lewis. And I remember seeing that one where he says, the one thing it cannot be is moderately important. And so that's just like one little dose of C.S. Lewis you could get for that day. And Lewis is just somebody who is incredibly thoughtful. And it's interesting to compare Lewis with like what we just talked about, which was Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, or R.C. Sproul, and kind of what they're doing versus what Lewis is doing. And I see them differently, and I don't know if you have thoughts about this. For a while, I probably just categorized Lewis as a theologian in my mind. And in some ways he is, because like Sproul says, everybody's a theologian. And Lewis is certainly very knowledgeable of theology. But Lewis is also very geared toward like English literature and philosophy. And what he does, I think, is just bring out truth in a way that speaks deeply to us in terms of the human experience. And so Lewis is not so much going to be he'll point you to the Bible. I don't want to say he doesn't point you to the Bible. He will point to biblical truth, but he'll do it in a way that's not like, okay, here's an exegesis of this passage, and here's how it systematically fits in with other doctrines. It's more about just kind of seeing the heart and the beauty behind biblical truth is the way I would describe it. But I love Lewis. Business of Heaven gives you a great highlight reel to read throughout the year of C.S. Lewis. Any thoughts?
Yeah, on what you were just saying about him, I don't know if this is a fair way to say it, but Lewis seems to me to be a master of parables. And so while I would look at Grudem and reading Grudem or reading Sproul as being like reading Paul, who is going to be teaching, these are the concepts and these are how I'm going to teach it. Lewis is illustrating it, and he's making it seem, oh, that's like that. And it kind of comes to life because of his ability to help you apply it in whether it be in a poetic way or in an emotional way, but it really is less about understanding how the words fit together or the argument of the text, and more about what does that look like in your life. So let me give you an illustration. And he does this in every kind of his writing. So if you're a little kid stuff and you're reading the Chronicles of Narnia, you'll have in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, you'll have Eustace Scrubb sees this bracelet, and it's like that bracelet's like sin, and he puts it on and he can't get it off, and he turns into a dragon. Once he gets sin on his arm, it changes who he is. He's already pretty dragony, but it brings it out, and he becomes a very bad person. And he's stuck in it, and he wants to get it off, but he can't, and his body grows and it's cutting into him. And then Aslan comes to him and says, if you want to get it off, you've got to cut your skin. So he begins cutting his skin, and he finds relief, but he still won't get it off. And then he eventually says, no, you have to let me cut your skin. And so Aslan basically cuts his skin off, and then the dragonness falls off, and he becomes a man. But it says it is both at the same time incredibly painful and incredibly freeing, because now he feels like he is who he really should be again, but the process is painful. Anyway, the way he tells the story, you're like, that's what conversion is like. It is like, I know that there's something cutting into me and I want to get it off and I don't know how, and I try some self fixes, but really he has to cut the old self away so that the new self can be free from the bondage of sin. Well, it's just this huge analogy. It's not an exegesis of a passage, but it's hard to read that and not think he gets it. He gets how it feels. And there's just a billion examples like that in his writing, where he helps your imagination wrap around this biblical concept. And I think that's what makes him incredible.
Yeah, it's very common when you read Lewis to think, oh, I never saw that before, or I never thought of it that way before. He just has a way of, like I was saying, expanding the mind as a value of reading. I
keep doing screen shares. Let me give you another one.
Sure.
I don't know if you can see this one. The Screw Tape Letters is that play that's coming November 15th. Amy Blanton sent this to me yesterday. I am thinking about beginning to read the Screw Tape Letters to my girls so that we can go watch that. I think it's Sunday at 3, so we'd have to eat lunch after church and head out there. We'll see. My girls love drama, so it seems like
I don't see a screen share, by the way.
I didn't share it. Let me share it. I put start to share. Can you see it now?
Yep.
C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters, Jacksonville, Florida, the Jacksonville Center for the Performing Arts. Did you go? I think we went with like Bruce Dugan.
Yeah,
we went to Gainesville, didn't we?
A few years ago. It was in Jacksonville.
It was in Jacksonville. Anyway.
Yeah, I forget what venue, but.
Anyway, I'm thinking about doing this. Hopefully it'll be fun. And
that's awesome. Screw Tape Letters is
awesome. If there's people who want to get a group, we probably have to get it fairly early, because I do think tickets sell pretty quick. But I've seen it before, and I really enjoyed it. So it might be a way to take in that book. It's not a reading of the book, so it's not identical, but it might be
close
good
though.
It's pretty similar. It might be worth familiarizing yourself with the book a little bit before going.
Yeah.
You don't have to read it cover to cover, but
it's definitely a play. I don't even know if a play is the right term, but it's definitely one that requires a lot of active listening.
It is in the kind of a play in the sense of the old
on a stage,
Shakespearean
somebody's acting.
soliloquy. A guy can stand up in costume, but there is a lot of monologue. It's kind of like a one man, but this one actually is a 2-man play. I think there might be a couple other little characters.
Yeah, Screw Tape obviously is the main character, and then he's got what is he called? The little demon.
Wormwood, isn't it?
No, Wormwood is the nephew that he's writing to, right? But then there's a little gremlin thing that kind of adds flavor to the.
But that's not in the original book. I think
it's named in the original somewhere.
Is it?
I could be wrong.
I don't remember that. I'll have to reread it. So anyway,
I forget the name, but it's a funny little name that they give him.
I would say, even if you're an adult, just on C.S. Lewis more broadly, take the time to read the Chronicles of Narnia. the amount of illustrations you'll have for the spiritual life out of those. His ability of describing pride and how pride works in the human life is so good. I think it's worth your time to read it periodically, books here and there. And then another, I've never read Business of Heaven. You made me want to. The other book is a lot of his books are challenging and good. I like Screw Tape Letters as well. I do feel like Mere Christianity is worth plowing through. It is such a good book. So C.S. Lewis is an author that the book you recommended is great, but even more broadly, he is just an author to have on your shelf, and he's good.
The little gremlin's name is Toad Pipe.
Toad Pipe.
Toad Pipe. Yep.
That sounds like could be a Marvel,
like a Mario
comic.
character.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
That's good. My turn.
Cool. Your turn. Yeah. Take it away.
All right. I got another R.C. Sproul book. Which I keep doing old books. I don't think this book is for sale anymore. I think it has been renamed as What is Reformed Theology? And I don't know why I decided to pick this, except for more of the story behind how it affected me. I read this book after college. I had just moved to Texas. And my college experience, so high school, walking with God wasn't important to me. I had the opportunity to learn a lot because I went to a Christian school, but I only learned what was required in a Christian school to pass a test. But I just didn't have a robust thinking about God. That wasn't important to me. When I became a Christian, and I think I was a Christian, but I really became serious about my faith at Campus Crusade, every single teacher that came in on a Thursday night was different. So there was just no coherence of Christian thought. And I just didn't know what I believed about anything. There were debates swirling around, but I didn't feel like I had a coherent thought of what it meant to be a Christian. When I went to Texas, somehow I came across this book, Grace Unknown by R.C. Sproul. And again, the modern, it's the same book, but it's just on a new title now called What is Reformed Theology? He describes what it means to be a Protestant Christian as opposed to a Catholic Christian in light of 10 basic principles. 5 points regarding the doctrine of salvation, typically called the doctrines of Calvinism, and 5 points regarding really more the Protestant Reformation, what we call them the 5 solas: sola scriptura, sola gratia, which is I'll just say the English names: sola scripture, the Bible alone; sola grace, grace alone; sola fide, the faith alone; sola Christus, Christ alone; sola Deo Gloria, for the glory of God alone. These things he describes as differentiating Protestants from Catholics. What this helped me do, and what made it interesting, it worked for me because it's kind of polemical. And what I mean by polemical, if you're not familiar with that term, is that it pits two ideas against each other in history, and it helped me think about these ideas not as just like concepts, but how these ideas became in tension in a historical setting and why they mattered in history, which gave me the framework to understand them in a way that was interesting, right? So I just didn't enjoy the textbook thing until it had a historical context for why it mattered. Why did it matter to Protestants that the Bible is our only authority and not popes and councils? Or why does it matter to us that Christ is the only Savior and not a treasury of merits that comes from all the saints? Faith alone and not faith and works alone. All of these things were built out of a historical context. I find that makes that polemical style of I believe this and they believe this makes the learning process interesting for me, because I want to be able to defend it against somebody who might attack it. And that just creates a level of interest. R.C. Sproul is one of the best at that kind of, some people believe this and some people believe this, and this is what you should believe if you're a Protestant or whatever. And so that was pretty influential for me. Grace Unknown. It'll probably be controversial to some people because it does have a section on Calvinism, which is what he's saying differentiates our view of salvation and other views of salvation. When I say our view, his view, certainly. And I agree with the way he has it framed. There are different ways of framing Calvinism. He changes the names of all the 5 points. So he frames it in a way I feel very comfortable with. But that conversation I know is always an issue for people. But I think the way he frames it and the way he describes it is one that is not just out there. It's I can wrap my head around it. I can understand why it mattered in the history of debate. And he frames it in a way that is a system of salvation that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and I always like that idea of understanding historically where doctrinal formulations came from, why they came about, what their importance was, because it just helps you. It helps you understand a lot better. But I've been glancing the whole time at my shelf for like a Sproul pick that I could piggyback on there, but I don't see one. But a lot of good Sproul stuff out there.
I like his personality. He just makes me laugh. I think he was a funny, solid guy.
Yeah, and that whole ministry of Ligonier. I mean, it had to, I mean, he had to be the foundation of that, but when you just think of the quality of it, like even the artistic quality of everything that they put out, we went to, I think it's Sanford, Florida, close to Orlando somewhere, is where his church was, St. Andrew's Chapel, I think is what they call it. But we were out in that area a few years back. Actually, it was during COVID, I think, and went to that campus, and just everything is just gorgeous. Like the building itself, the lawn, everything. It's just like everything associated with Sproul and Ligonier was just done at such a highest quality, with like a timeless quality and character about it. You know, it's not like, not trying to hate on mega churches, but you think about popular churches today, and it's more about like the atmosphere and the lighting and stuff, fog lights, whatever. But this was more about a timeless, beautiful aesthetic that was more kind of historically rooted, and it was all just well done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. I think Ryan and his family went there for a while. Ryan Goodson. And before Ryan moved up here, but I think he still goes out there when he visits his mom and dad.
Yeah, and I mean, I view that as theologically significant, and I think it was ultimately based in their theology that God Himself is worth the highest that we have to offer and give. I mean, you just think biblically about all the ways that the temple was beautified. You know, people cared about the place that was associated with God, and so I think that's a good thing.
The last book that I have, I picked books that I saw as like little turning points in my life. You know, the Grudem one is one, that feeling that I can answer somebody's question is when it sparked in me this love for teaching. Sproul's thing that had a big spark in me, also for a love of teaching and a beginning to kind of organize my thoughts in a way that was coherent, consistent, and differentiated me from other forms of Christianity. And that was really helpful. That's why Sproul was significant for me. There's one other thing that he did, and then it's going to piggyback in my next book. So I hate to steal it, but that solo Deo Gloria thing, that everything exists for the glory of God, was a worldview thing for me that made everything else make sense. I still see people posting on Facebook and things like that all the time of God made me for some like this exact moment or this exact thing. And there seems to be like, what is my purpose in life if not for something here? And what he did is reoriented that everything exists for God's glory. So why would suffering exist? Why would salvation exist? Why would you exist? Why would I exist? Why would anything exist except for God to display who He is and to glorify Himself in it? And that became the framework by which I'm able to explain my purpose in life, why I exist as a father, why I exist as a pastor, why we exist as people who try to take care of our yards. If you're a church or you do that, you want to live in such a way that says this is what God is worthy of. And even evil exists because it is the negative contrast of good, right? So evil is the privation of good, is where good isn't there. But why is it valuable? Only because black highlights white. And so I can see the goodness of God by the existence of evil and its judgment by God. And therefore, I don't have to explain every instance of evil, but God's permission of Satan to do evil makes sense to me if God's ultimate aim is to show that he's not that. There's a divine polemic in which he says, there is an opposite to me that is necessary for you to see if you're going to see who I am. And I think that begins to make a coherent worldview.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Amen. That's good.
All right, you're up.
I'll jump into my last pick of the day, which may perhaps be, shall we say, the most relevant, directly relevant in terms of a topic that people might say, oh yeah, that sounds like something I need. And so my pick is Crazy Busy by Kevin DeYoung. I like the subtitle too, a mercifully short book about a really big problem. So I think probably a lot of people would say they feel too busy in their lives, or that, life is kind of like a roller coaster, just full of so many things, and hardly have time for anything that's good and important. And this is a book about trying to speak into that problem. And what I like about Kevin DeYoung is that he has a way of seeing kind of trends that are out there, problems that people have, and speaking to them in very practical and relevant ways, in ways that I think a lot of times are liberating for people. So he has another book that I've recommended many, many times before called Just Do Something. It's a book about finding God's will for your life. Or,
excellent book.
Like that was another trend I think that Kevin DeYoung saw in terms of how people were thinking about God's will for their lives, and viewing it as a very mysterious thing. Like, I don't know God's will for my life, so what am I supposed to do? I just need to wait around until I get, more confirmation of what God wants me to do. And so I think Kevin DeYoung saw that there were many people, young people, and I was one of them at the time, that were kind of in that trap of letting fear about the will of God kind of keep you from doing things. And he wrote a book called Just Do Something, and basically making the point that God's very clear about what his will for our life is in his word. And if we'll major on the things he has revealed, then he'll take care of the other things that he has not revealed, that we don't know. And so, but anyway, I found that book very, very helpful and liberating. This one also, I think, can be the same kind of book for people who just feel too busy. And it's a book that can be liberating in the sense of letting you know it's okay to say no to things sometimes, and just by doing everything that's available to do, or everything that you're asked to do, you can end up not pleasing God by doing that way. And here's a representative quote for the book. He says, "We are busy because we try to do too many things. We do too many things because we say yes to too many people. We say yes to all these people because we want them to like us and we fear their disapproval." And that's kind of one of the more punchier lines that's in the book. And, just making the point that a lot of times the problem in the fact that we're too busy is that we're trying to please man, and we care more about pleasing man than pleasing God. And so I think it's a challenging book in that way, but can also be a liberating book. I'll give one more quote. This one has to do with parents and parenting children, which can oftentimes be a source of a lot of our busyness. But DeYoung says it used to be, so he's contrasting with kind of the way things used to be in previous generations. He says it used to be, as far as I can tell, that Christian parents basically tried to feed their kids, clothe them, teach them about Jesus, and keep them away from explosives. Now our kids have to sleep on their backs. No, wait, their tummies. No, never mind, their backs. While listening to baby Mozart and surrounded by scenes of Starry, Starry Night. So I like that. I mean, you can hear there the kind of tone that DeYoung has. You know, I mentioned A.W. Tozer a minute ago and his kind of flowery, more formal language. But DeYoung is kind of more modern in his tone and kind of connected with the way people, the issues people have today. And so, he's just very, very practical, always points back to Scripture and just has a knack for liberating us from burdensome ways of thinking that we often put on ourselves. And so, Crazy Busy by Kevin DeYoung, recommended.
That's one of his books that I have not read, but generally speaking, if he writes something, I want to read it. Because his writing, it tends to be short, very clear, a lot of Bible, and he usually frames things in a way that I can understand and repeat to somebody. So just some examples. His book on homosexuality and what the Bible says about homosexuality is the shortest and most clear if you want a biblical understanding of homosexuality. There's longer books. They're not more clear, I don't think, in my opinion. Right. His book on women in ministry, same. His book on, I was running through a list and now all of a sudden I'm kind of blanking on some of them. But he's got books on, his book on the Lord's Prayer was phenomenal. He's just got books on a million different topics. Many of them can be somewhat controversial or in the moment kind of things. And he just lays out biblical principles, major texts that we should consider from the Bible in a way that is usually short, usually well organized, and a way that I can wrap my head around. His book on Scripture itself is really good. Anyway, I'm jumping around too much. He's very organized in his thoughts and lays things out in a way that I can get the bones of what he's saying, and then I can actually repeat that because it's not based on some crazy philosophical idea. Then if you understand all the nuances, he's not that way. He's just very clear, very accessible. I like him a lot.
Yeah. So, and another little thought that he puts into this book is about scheduling time to be unscheduled. So like making an intentional effort to have time where you don't have anything else to do and actually guarding that time and saying no to things sometimes if it would get in the way of that unscheduled time. And I think that was one of the freeing things about the book is just letting you know that it's okay to say no and right to say no to things many times. And I think a flip side to that would be learning to be a person who's okay with being told no by others, because it goes both directions. So
that's
anyway,
good.
Great book.
All right, my last book, and then I might do some rapid fire questions for you after that. But my last book is, and again, my books I chose as books that I thought had an influence on me. So anyway, Desiring God. Meditations of a Christian Hedonist. I first heard about him when I was in Australia with Campus Crusade for Christ. A guy came and said, "You've got to listen to this John Piper guy." And I could not stand him. I'm like, he yells and he's crazy and he just feels like he's putting on a show for everybody. And I thought I didn't think he was genuine at first because nobody's that emotional, right? He's just one emotional dude. And I'm like, I don't know. Over time, listening to him, I realized actually he's just incredibly genuine. He's just different than me. And so now I kind of look back at it. I'm like, I was just a jerk who believed that if you're not like me, you're not genuine. And that's not true. There's just different kinds of people in the world. The argument of the book, however, was radical for me because the central message of the book is that what God most desires for you is to delight in him, to enjoy him, to see him as big and glorious and great. You're created for the purpose of worship. And worship is primarily enjoying God, delighting in him. That's why he made the world. That goes back to the Sola Deo Gloria thing that we talked about a second ago. This was really a paradigm shifting thing in my mind, not because anybody had said differently, maybe a little bit said differently, but I don't blame the church I grew up in for this. It was maybe just a product of me being a kid and thinking that this is what they did. But I felt like every sermon essentially was how bad the world is. And you just watch out, and if everything's going to hell in a handbasket, we're on this slippery slope and the world is dissolving and it's bad and it's horrible and it's just going to get worse. And it just felt like a very down on the world, Christians are good people and the world is bad people, is primarily what we were hearing all the time. And I don't know, that wasn't all that compelling to me. I liked a lot of things that I was doing in the world, but it did feel like the main thing was being more moral than all those hoodlums out there. And then what this book said is like, fine, whatever. But God did not create you to be better than your neighbor, right? God did not create you to be the most moral person on the block. You should be more moral. You should do right. But God created you to love him. And so if you feel like the bulk of what you talk about is not him, then it's not actually Christianity because you're not focused on Christ. And that I am summarizing in my way of interpreting that. There's obviously a lot more to that, but my main thing should be delighting in him and seeing him. I feel that we're living in a time in the Christian world where we may be revisiting that error that he corrected, because politics, there's a lot of people that are Christian politic pushers that you rarely hear them talking about just loving God. It's all like, if you're not, don't you know that Democrats are the evil ones and Republicans are the good ones? And like every message is, that is horrible. This is horrible. And I agree with a lot of the things that are being said in principle, but the flow of it is rarely like, dude, I opened up the Bible today and saw this, and this was beautiful. This was good, and this stirred my soul. And I just feel like what he was for me is a recalibration of what it means to be a Christian. It is not whether I vote Democrat or Republican, even though I don't want to go so far as to say those things don't matter. They do matter. The moral life I live matters, but they're not the definition of what I was made to do. Seeing the glory of God and delighting in the glory of God and looking at him, it's wild that God became man and died for me so that I could pour out my soul to him and worship it. That is the story that should really grip my soul. And so for him, it was a recalibration of what being a Christian meant and what I wanted to live for. I do think perhaps you could move in that direction and act like nothing in the world matters, which he doesn't do. But I do think you could act like the world doesn't matter. That would be a wrong correction. But there should be a weight to what excites me that is more involved in him and less involved in the things of this earth. I think we've talked before about a book. There's a line in an old hymn, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in light of his glory and grace. And then Joe Rigney wrote a book called Strangely Bright. And like the world is good. I think that you could wrongly think the world is bad and God is good. That's not the way he describes the world, because God made the world to display his glory. So the world has great things, and that's fine. But it is still true that at the end of the day, he is more glorious than any nation or tribe or kingdom or good gift that he's given to us. And at the end of the world, the reason it's created is so that we could see that everything else, all flesh is like grass, all of its glory is like the flower of grass. The grass withers and the flower falls, but the word of the Lord remains forever, that it is the standard of glory. So I think that's what this book does exceptionally well. It did for me anyway. And That was really a worldview shaping book for me.
Yeah. I think for me, probably Piper in his preaching ministry was most influential to me. It's not, I think I read all of his trilogy of books. There's Desiring God, and then there's Future Grace, and also The Pleasures of God. All pretty thick books, and some people criticize Piper for being a little too wordy.
And repetitive. All the books have a lot of overlap.
Yeah. But, I mean, he does just have one kind of overarching message that fills all he does and says in his ministry, that idea that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him.
Yep.
And so Piper really had a way of helping me to see that all of life is really for the glory of God. And everything else I do in this life should have reference and connection to who God is and doing things for his glory. And so, Piper was helpful to me in that regard. One sermon recommendation, if I were to tell you to just go listen to one sermon from Piper, I always go back to Passion 2000, his famous seashells sermon, where he talked about the couple from Reader's Digest who retired early and then just spent the rest of their life, taking it easy and collecting seashells, and just how he speaks back to that and challenges us to live for a higher purpose than that. It kind of led to a pendulum swing where today people are like wanting to clarify that it's not wrong to collect seashells, but I mean, I think at the moment and at the time it was just such a powerful word, and still is for me. Like, I like to listen to that sermon once a year if I can. It's from the Passion Conference in the year 2000. But anyway, great.
I think a guy named Sean DeMars was talking about it, and he said it's objectively not Piper's best sermon, but it was the line that objectively changed a whole generation. That within that sermon, there is this section. First off, the location, he's at Passion. Second off, the topic of what matters in this life, and a generation of people who are being told, what's your legacy going to be? What are you going to do that matters in this world? And he said, Piper reframed for, I think, a generation of Christians, what actually does matter at the end of my life? What do I want to say that I have accomplished? And that question is so fundamental to your happiness, to believe that I'm going to, one day, if God gives me 80 years or 90 years or 100 years, I'm going to look back and have to ask myself, was that a life well lived? Will he say, well done, good and faithful servant? And if I am living for that, then right now I need to be asking, what things contribute to a life well lived? And it is really a very, very powerful concept.
Yeah, I loved it so much that I bought a copy of the February 1998 Reader's Digest that he read from. Obviously not the exact one, but Start Now, Retire Early. So I like to look at that. Always reminds me of it.
Who's the girl on the bottom cover? It says A Champion's Vow. Tennis player?
I don't know. I think that may be related to a different story. Right. I don't know. Who is that? I'll figure out later.
I've got a challenge. You have not prepared for this. I only barely have prepared for this. So here's the ground rules. What I'm going to do is list out categories of books within the Christian worldview. A lot of books will kind of fit in this category, kind of fit in another. Don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about technical accuracy. If we like, well, I don't know if that's more Christian worldview or more counseling or whatever. That doesn't matter. I'm going to give some categories of books, and let's list out just give me a list. Don't go into it. Just give me a list of a handful of books that you think are significant titles in that category, worth being aware of. And maybe together we can pick. If I was going to start with one, we can. But often it's too hard to say there's one that matters. But we'll just kind of, for the fun of it, go through some categories and list a handful of titles. Some of them will be books we've already named, but some of them will be things we haven't.
Okay.
All right. Let's start with before we talk about books, authors in general, if you just say, I would love for our people to know these handful of authors, who would be some top list names that you would want?
Well, it's like all names we've mentioned already, but like Kevin DeYoung, R.C. Sproul, John Piper, Joe Rigney is one we didn't give a specific, well, we referenced him, but
C.S. Lewis.
Joe Rigney, C.S. Lewis.
Yep. Yeah, I think those are great. I think some guys we didn't mention that I think are good, a little bit older, is Jerry Bridges. He's an introductory guy that is just phenomenal. Obviously, older, you've talked a lot about Spurgeon before. His books are not as accessible for most people, but sermons are great. I mean, I love them. All right. Just holiness, Christian living books. So this is what it is like to live a Christian life. What are some books that you would throw into that category?
A book called Holiness by J.C. Ryle, which is historical. But I read that one recently and think there's a lot of good stuff in it.
Probably a lot of other books that we'll name related to that built on J.C. Ryle's. His was a foundational book in that category. I think Pursuit of Holiness by Jerry Bridges would be in that category.
Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. That's probably, I mentioned Knowledge of the Holy today. Pursuit of God is probably his most popular book. That'd be a good one. We talked about Don Whitney a few weeks ago with Spiritual Disciplines of the Christian Life. That's probably, on most practically speaking, the highest recommendation I would give.
Okay, I'm going to get the next category, and I bet Don Whitney's going to hit both of these for you.
Okay, a
book you would recommend to a new Christian, a new believer book.
Yeah, Don Whitney.
Yeah,
Disciplines of the Christian Life. For sure.
I would put Piper's Desiring God. In some ways, you would say, that's not exactly it. But what he does is he talks about how each of the big categories like prayer and Bible reading and Christian love all are connected to the overarching theme of God's glory is most important. So there's a lot of overlap between that and new believer stuff. However, I would say it's probably too dense in some ways for the average new believer, but it does cover those main categories.
Are you going to do a devotional category, like a daily devotion category, or not?
We'll
I'm just
add
asking
it in there.
because of what? No, I'm just because I was going to suggest Alistair Begg's devotion.
I haven't looked at that yet.
Truth
but I've
for
heard.
Life.
Yep.
Truth for Life, I think, is really good. And I would put that in the category of new Christian, perhaps. So don't feel a need to add a devotional category. I just wanted to plug that one in.
No, well, let's just add the devotion one now. Truth for Life. I think one of the most famous is Spurgeon's Morning and Evening.
Morning and Evening.
Tara Lee Cobble has got pretty famous for Bible recap stuff, which I think is a great devotional guide. She has a book that goes along with it, but also a podcast. A lot of people have really loved her.
John Piper has a couple of daily devotional books, I think. They're not like whole year long.
I thought
They're
Pleasure
like
of
30
God
days.
Is that not? Is that more of a chapter
so. I think
book?
Pleasures of God reads more like Desiring God.
Okay.
But I forget what it's called, but if you just look up John Piper devotion, it should come up. It was like 30 or 31 days or something.
Yep.
The one that I read. It's really good. Very short, punchy Piper instead of long Piper.
An overview of
Paul Tripp, New Morning Mercies. A lot of people like that one too.
Paul
New
Tripp
Morning
is another
Mercies.
name that I think it would be worth knowing. Books about the gospel, what it means to be a Christian, how salvation works, gospel-focused books.
Greg Gilbert has a book called What is the Gospel?
Super good.
Yeah.
Very
short.
very short, very clear.
Mm-hmm. Jerry Bridges' books, again, are good for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Jerry Bridges has, good. What is it? We have it for free at the church. Is something Grace, and I've just blanked on the name, which is I hate that I did
I
that.
know what you mean. I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Here, I'll look it up real quick. I can't believe once I blink, I can't get it.
Grace,
Um,
grace, God's grace.
Jerry
I'll sing a song
Bridges.
while you're looking at it. Grace that is greater than all our sin. God's grace.
Gospel for Real Life. Once I got grace in my mind, that's why I was off. The Gospel for Real Life. We have a copy of that at the church if you want to read that, and it's free. And I think it's a great overview of the gospel.
The discipline of grace is what you're thinking of, I think.
Discipline of Grace is a. He's got so many good books.
Trusting God, Pursuit of Holiness.
The Joy of Fearing God we went over not long ago. I kind of read through that. That was a great book. Jerry Bridges
Growing
is
Your
great.
Faith. He's got Growing Your Faith. That sounds good.
I have not read that one. All right. Church life. How to be a Christian in church. So this is kind of a weird topic probably, but anything that came to your mind? The reason this came to my mind, I'll just go ahead and tell you, is I looked up on christianbook.com books to read during your lifetime, and it had one called Life Together by Bonhoeffer, and I thought, well, that's a book kind of on the fellowship of the church and how to interact. And I believe that the beginning of that book is the best part of it. So I wouldn't say that the whole book is equally compelling, but the beginning of it is just radically compelling.
I've read a smattering of books on worship. Bob Kauflin has a few books on worship that I think are really good from like the standpoint of leading in music, but not just like being a worship leader, like just being a participant in the worship of God's people.
What about Sing by the Gettys? Did you read that?
Sing by the Gettys, that's a good one. Another short one. Love the Gettys and all their work, and that's a good book as well.
I would say if you really want to do a big dive into church, how it's structured, pastors, elders, things like that, there's a group called 9 Marks, and they just have a massively big published thing and a bunch of really small books on individual topics about church life. Marriage.
John Piper has a book called This Momentary Marriage.
That's right.
Which I think I have read.
I've read.
This is one area that I do not have a lot of books under my belt on. So,
my current favorite is The Meaning of Marriage. I like Tim Keller. I like the way he writes. He's very he's into other kind of modern thinking and academic world and non-Christian, and he kind of challenges and brings that together. So I put him there. I just got a book. Let me see if it's sitting here. Here, let me grab it. My friend Justin Braun just bought me this book called Catching Foxes. Didn't buy it for me, recommended it. Catching Foxes by John Henderson. And I bought a copy.
Hunting book. That's a
it's a hunting
change
book.
of pace.
So anyway, Catching the Foxes that will ruin the vineyard, I think it comes out of Song of Solomon. But there are things that are traps in our marriage that would mess up our marriage. This is a premarital counseling book, but I think that it is helpful for anybody. One of the things that makes it interesting, and I might start using it more. I bought it for Cadence and Connor. But one of the things that is interesting is that in addition to having chapters that are pretty good, it has some discussion guide things in it. So questions to ask yourself or to ask your spouse. And it seems like a pretty good book. I've only just started working through it, but I did think it was helpful and very, very, very practical. So it's not just a theology, though there is a theology of marriage. There is also some practical discussion guides. Another book that is famous within Christian circles is Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas. That's kind of worth knowing about. All right. Apologetics. Defending your faith, why we believe what we believe.
Probably a good starting point, sort of thinking in terms of what's most accessible, would be any of the several books that Lee Strobel has written about how how are they titled? They're all titled the same
The
way.
Case for Christ, the case for faith,
Christ, case for
Yep.
Easter, the case for creation, the case for the resurrection. I can't remember all that he has, but
the Case for
those are
Christ
good.
is his most famous one.
Yeah, yeah, and they're written almost like a novel. So it's like it's kind of written to be a page turner. It's telling the story of his own story of researching.
Yeah, he was a journalist, and he wanted to basically disprove Christianity.
Right,
And he
yeah.
approached it like a journalist would, and in the process became converted.
Yeah, which often happens.
Yeah.
A more upper level guy that I think is really good on apologetics, whether it's reading his books. I don't know that I've read any of his books, but I've watched a lot of his content online, just on YouTube and stuff like that. But William Lane Craig, I think, is a great thinker in terms of apologetics. Trying to think of some more.
I think Mere Christianity is a classic. It is
For
his
sure.
argument for the universal knowledge of sin and good and evil and sinfulness in general as an evidence for a universal standard, which has to be God. That is, a lot of people have taken it from them, but I think his is the best presentation, and it's sort of the standard. It's the gold standard that everybody is referencing with that one. Josh McDowell is another famous one. He's got some bigger books like Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Massive, yeah.
But he's got a small book called More Than a Carpenter. It's really short, but punchy and good. I read it in college, and it just like eliminated doubts that I had. It's a very short but great explanation for why we believe the Bible that we have is reliable. It is an accurate reflection of the original writings. Great. One of the shortest and clearest arguments is More Than a Carpenter. Tim Keller has a book called The Reason for God. It became very popular. It's very good. It's a little bit more interacting with modern thought, modern criticisms of science. That is very, very good. That's probably a good starting point.
It's good. Yeah.
Here's a super broad category. Anything you want to throw in is good. Church history. You can talk about people in church history. You can talk about overviews of church history, whatever you think.
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is Church History in Plain Language by
Bruce Shelley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of books we read in seminary is a two-part book. They're both volumes are about the same size. One covers the early church fathers to the Reformation, which is a big, long period of time. And then the other covers like Reformation to present day, I think. But this is, the guy's name is Justo. It looks like Justo, but it's Justo Gonzalez. It's called The Story of Christianity.
How did that read? I have not read that. Did you think it read easily?
It's been a long time, but I thought it was more or less kind of seemed to read the same as Bruce Shelley did.
Okay.
Maybe
I thought
a
Bruce
little,
Shelley was easy.
Maybe a little
enjoyable.
Maybe a little more advanced, but I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember specifically though. But I liked that one. There was a book I read by, can't remember his name, but it's called Getting to Know the Church Fathers. So it was kind of meant to be a accessible way to be introduced to that early church time period, first 300 years or so of Christian history. Guys like Irenaeus or Tertullian, or later on Augustine, or who's the incarnation guy?
Athanasius.
Athanasius, yeah.
All right.
So anyway, yeah, that's just first stuff that comes to my mind.
I'm going to share screen again if I can do it. I've messed up several times, but let's see if we can get this happen. Another Ligonier guy. Can you see Robert Godfrey? That's his picture. He has a series on church history that is actually 6 volumes. This is the first 12 volumes of the early church. Well, this one actually, I don't know. I've found that his stuff on YouTube is not always organized in a way that's easy to find. So this is Survey of History parts 1 through 6. But then Augustine, Crusades, I don't know. It's not laid out. It's actually much, much more robust than what I'm seeing right here. But that's all audiobook. He's great. Also, like 25 minutes per lecture. Some really, really fun stuff. And it's audio, so I think that's fun. So Robert Godfrey, he's a Ligonier guy. I think he's super fun to listen to. Great historian. It's all audio if you like that more than you like reading books.
Yeah, that's great. There is also, let me grab this.
Yep.
There is also, we talked about Grudem earlier. There is also a companion volume to Grudem called not Systematic Theology, but Historical Theology. And it's written by Greg Allison.
Yes.
And it is formatted the same way as Grudem's is. The chapters more or less follow the same outline as Grudem's chapters, or there may be some. They give you a chart that says, okay, here's the chapters from historical theology, and here's the chapters they correspond to in Grudem. So it's written kind of with Grudem's systematic in mind. So what it does is basically it takes Grudem's content and those topics that Grudem addresses, but instead addresses how those doctrines developed throughout history.
So it's
kind
a
of
chronological reading instead of a logical order reading. It's a chronological order reading.
So you could read Grudem's chapter on the Trinity, and there will be a chapter in here that is also about the Trinity. But instead of showing you how that doctrine is unfolded in Scripture, is going to show you how that doctrine was expressed and developed throughout history, which is really cool. But once again, don't get intimidated by the size of it. It's easy to just dip in and out of as you please. So that's another one I wanted to mention there.
Super interesting. So this is kind of related. Biographies, and it can be any era, any time, any biography. Some that you just enjoyed or you like. And you don't even have to say the most important ones, just things you like.
John Piper has a series of books that are biographies that are, I think, are there 4 per book? Is that how they're laid out? 3 or 4 per book?
I think that's right.
And I forget the titles of them, but they all kind of have similar titles. But they,
A Legacy of Joy is one of them.
A Legacy of Joy.
Roots of Endurance is one.
Like, Jonathan Edwards or David Brainerd or Martin Luther, or I think William Cooper is in there. The different guys, some you may have heard about, some you may not have heard about, but a very short, because there's like 4 per book.
So
they're very shortened biographies.
He has a sermon that's kind of based on one of those, and it's on Adoniram Judson. It's one of my all-time favorite sermons. It was just... It was called, this is so John Piper, The Suffering, the title was How Few There Are Who Die So Hard, The Suffering and Success of Adoniram Judson. What a title for a sermon. So anyway, How Few There Are Who Die So Hard, The Suffering and Success of Adoniram Judson. I probably listened to that 15 times. I mean, I just love that sermon. And he's got that and others in that series of biographies. Like you said, they're short, they're digestible sermon length rather than novel length, and they're good. Yeah.
If you want something a little more beefy, I haven't read them, but I know people love Eric Metaxas's biographies on Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther.
I've read a couple of different Luther biographies. Metaxas's, there's people who debate whether it's not the most scholarly. I found it easily the most enjoyable, though. I like Roland Bainton is considered one of the more academic, but and it was good. I don't want to slam it, but I thought Metaxas was longer, but it was just like a thrill ride to read that. It was really, really good. Some others that I loved. I love The Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert, which is Rosaria Butterfield's biography. Corrie ten Boom's biography, The Hiding Place, phenomenal. And one of the ones that I find just deeply, deeply stirring is Johnny Erickson Tada's biography. Just phenomenal. There's one called God's Smuggler by Brother Andrew that's really fun.
Did you ever read To the Golden Shore? It's Adoniram Judson.
No, I haven't. But that's not. It's written by. Is it? Did he write? He didn't write it.
By his. I'm not sure. No, I don't think he wrote it.
I have it, but I have not read it.
But a lot of people like that one. Courtney Anderson wrote it, but it's The Life of Adoniram Judson, To the Golden Shore.
Yeah.
Heard a lot of good about that one.
Broad, anything that you would just say this is a theology book. So whether it's big theology or whatever, it's theology. I think we've already listed some.
Yeah, a lot.
If you had to pick one systematic theology, would it be Grudem?
Yeah, it would have to be Grudem.
One like giant big book.
Yeah.
I think that you already listed your favorite theology, which is The Knowledge of the Holy. I would consider that a theology book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Such a broad category.
There's a lot in that category.
Such a broad category.
I don't know what to say.
It's an unfair one. It's too broad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to go deeper than that. I think those are great. The
Bible.
The Bible, yeah. That's great.
It's a good one. Highly recommended.
All right, here's a weird category. This might be hard. So most books aren't about a passage of the Bible. So commentaries are, and then there's sometimes books that just deal with a certain section of the Bible. You might not call them categories, but let's talk about books about the Bible, either describing how to read the Bible, hermeneutics, or about passages within the Bible, but books about the Bible.
So commentaries do fall in this category?
Yeah, I'm making this as big and broad of a category as you can imagine, but books about the Bible.
Good, accessible, devotionally sensitive, just in terms of thinking about how the Bible matters to our life and our thinking today, and just a good, accessible writer. I like Warren Wiersbe. His commentaries are good, and he's got, I think, on just about every book of the Bible. And I got a 5-volume set that's like all of his commentaries compiled together. That's really good.
Individually titled, if you've seen them, like Be Wise, Be Compassionate,
Yep. A lot of people love John MacArthur's commentaries. Those would be, I would place them as more advanced, but very, very good.
John Stott has a series that tend to be much more accessible when you find his. I think his are great.
I think it's worthwhile, and I would say like one of Wiersbe's B commentaries is perfect for this. But to just pick a book that you want to read fairly slowly. You're not going to be in a hurry to get through it, but pick a book of the Bible that you want to read through carefully, and then pick a commentary like one of Wiersbe's commentaries that you're going to read alongside of that reading of whatever book, whether it's the Gospel of John or Book of Hebrews or whatever, and just read. And you don't have to worry so much about your pace. Just take as much time as you need to get through that book of the Bible and that commentary simultaneously in tandem. I think that would be a very beneficial thing.
I agree. Couple other books for me, 2 from Kevin DeYoung. We have a couple copies left at the church, but his book on the Lord's Prayer is really short, but I think for the average person to sit down and kind of wrestle with the Lord's Prayer a little bit more deeply is phenomenal. Even though it's so short, it's phenomenal. And there's several books on a general theology of the Bible, but since we've been talking about Kevin DeYoung, Taking God at His Word is a really good book on just what is the Christian's view of the Bible and how it affects our life. I think that's a really good book. There's other books that are like that, but it's a great one. All right, last one. Fiction books, Christian fiction, or within the realm of Christian fiction. Anything that stands out in your mind?
Narnia is like the first thing that comes to my mind, but
The
I
Narnia
don't want
book-
to take yours.
No. The first one that came to my mind is different, but Narnia is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
I believe, let me just say this. I believe the value of fiction is that it takes, if it's good Christian fiction, is it takes principles from the Bible and puts them into parables. That's what a fiction book is. It's essentially the working out of a parable by which we see the virtues, the logic, and it just puts flesh and blood on principles that are there. Not real flesh and blood, obviously, but it helps us imagine it. I think that's why something like Lord of the Rings, which you would say, well, that's not exactly Christian, but it's so Christian worldview that you see sin represented in some ways with the ring of power, the way it calls to people. You see courage and bravery. You see all sorts of virtues played out in there. And you would say, well, maybe it's not an exposition of Scripture or an allegory of Scripture, but it is so Christian worldview that you can read it and talk about Christian principles of virtue as you walk through that book. Narnia, I think, is even more obvious, some of those connections that you're making with Scripture as you work through the Narnia books. But there's one Christian fiction book that I would say is the most famous of all time of Christian allegory, and it's old. You know what it is?
Pilgrim's Progress.
Pilgrim's Progress. I think that's the most famous Christian fiction book ever written.
Yeah.
And kind of debated today because it's not so accessible, I would say, for the average person.
Yeah. Yeah. If you read an older version, it will definitely be a little more challenging. They do have more modern kind of retellings of it, or just updated language versions that I think could be helpful to people. It's certain. I mean, there's no question about its influence as far as Christian fiction goes. And I think I've, heard the argument, and I believe it, that probably the second most influential or
Published
widely
book.
distributed published book behind the Bible.
Printed is the word I was looking for. Printed book.
And so, yeah, definitely that. There's another book. I don't know much about this. It's his name, Charles Sheldon guy, but another old school, not quite as old school as Pilgrim's Progress, but a book called In His Steps, which is like about a group of people in a church who take on a challenge of basically the "What would Jesus do?" challenge. I don't know if they put it in exactly those terms, but and then how that commitment that they make to only do things that they're certain Jesus himself would do, how that ends up affecting their lives in different ways and affecting this whole town and community. I read that not too long ago and thought it was really good.
It is a very, very famous book, but I have never read it. In His Steps by Charles Sheldon. I mean, it was printed so much that you could find at a used bookstore. You could probably pick it up for $1 or $2. I used to see it all the time. Or if you find an estate sale from somebody who's old and just died, they probably had it on their bookshelf. It was more popular in days gone by.
Another
but
one.
You just inspired me to want to read it.
Yeah, you should. An author I hear a lot about today, but I've never read any of her stuff, is Marilyn Robinson. Have you read any of her books? She's got this, the one title that comes to mind is called Gilead. Or Gilead, I don't know how it's pronounced, but I think there's it's like a Gilead series that she's written, but she's won like all kind of awards and stuff. But from what I can tell, she herself is a Christian, and a lot of her Christian faith comes out in her novels that she writes. So I think she'd probably be a good one to read. I want to read her myself.
I have read other people, like John MacArthur listed as one of the most influential books he's read, but I have not read it myself. Here, I'm going to read to you something interesting, and then maybe I'm done with my list.
Okay.
Let me grab a book off my shelf real quick. Y'all took a break for me to go find a book. I'm going to read to you a snippet from this book, which is called Remaking the World. It's a book by Andrew Wilson. He says how 1776 changed the West, or how 1776 created the post-Christian West. The basic argument is that the world that we know it only makes sense in light of Christianity. And I'm overlaying what I'm getting ready to read a little bit to say that it is almost true that every fiction book is a Christian book, whether it means to be or not. And it's because the gospel has so radically changed the culture that it has become embedded in the way people tell and think about stories. So this is talking about Harry Potter. There's a little bit of debate. I think it's clear that Harry Potter was intentionally written with Christian themes and by a Christian lady, even if we would say not necessarily a conservative Christian, but certainly Christian themes. But let me read to you a little bit. This is kind of interesting. And I read it because Harry Potter might be a book that you don't think of as Christian. It's certainly was debated with all of its ghosts and magic and all of that stuff. But he says, the fusion of the Christian and romantic influences is even clearer in by far the most popular piece of art produced in this century. Harry Potter is a thoroughly romantic story. It is a tale of childhood innocence confronting the desire to have power over the world and emerging victorious. The setting is a dark castle filled with ghosts and suits of armor. Our heroes are adolescents discovering themselves. People drink potions to escape, dig deep into historic myths, resist evil by projecting their happiest memories. Spells work only if they are cast with a sufficient level of feeling. The most odious characters in the story are thoroughly sensible rationalists, anti-magical Dursleys. But Harry, Snape, and Dumbledore, they all die for love. Snape, in particular, is a gothic anti-hero dressed in a dark cloak and plagued with unrequited desire. Anyway, what he's saying is that in one sense, it is a book that is thoroughly romantic, right? So it's rationalism is bad. Everything logical and spelled out is bad. The magicalness of the world and my feelings and being true to yourself, that's all part of it. But then he says, it is also a thoroughly Christian story. This becomes very obvious in the final volume as Harry lays down his life for his friends, passes into another world at King's Cross Station, and then
spoiler alert.
Yeah, I hope you haven't read it. And then rises from the dead to defeat the powers of darkness.
What?
If you haven't read book 7, sorry, I can't let my kids read it. They haven't read it. But Christian themes are present throughout the series. The conflict between the House of the Lion and the House of the Snake. The references to Scripture at key moments. The frequent sacramental allusions. The eschatology. The sevenfold structure. The portrayal of good as substitutionary sacrifice. The depiction of evil as the desire to be godlike and master death. The Gethsemane-esque scene in which Dumbledore drinks the cup of suffering so that Harry does not have to. There's plenty of debate over whether J.K. Rowling was deliberately writing a Christian allegory here, but that is somewhat beside the point. The pervasive influence of Christianity on weirder, which is Western and all these things that stands for, Western culture is even more obvious if she wasn't intentionally doing it. So the point is that Christianity, we now live in a world that has, the gospel has so permeated everything in the world, like that little seed that the ravens wanted to eat up has now grown into a tree and the world rests in its branches, that it is hard to write any moral tale of imagination that doesn't depict love ultimately as what Christ, some version or some retelling of what Christ did for his church. And so I think that there are some very objectively, intentionally Christian novels, but I do think that as Christians, we think, man, look at what God has done so much to the extent that there's a sense in which every fiction book is somehow a reflection of the ultimate true story of Christ, his love, and his sacrifice for his people. I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting thing about how thoroughly Christian Harry Potter is, even if she doesn't intend it to be, but she can't say it.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I don't know how related it is to everything.
I think for classics, for sure, like Les Mis, which I have been reading for a while, like it's just the Christian faith or is all over the place in that story. You know, and so.
And I'm reading right now The Count of Monte Cristo and how he's thrown in jail. I'm in the beginning parts of it. He's thrown in jail. He's in isolated confinement. I can't remember if I said this last week. He's in total seclusion, and that becomes a parallel of what hell is like when we are isolated from God and isolated from people. Aloneness, separation, darkness, and his being locked in a dungeon is symbolically him experiencing hell, and he'll be reborn from it in a sense, but Christian themes are just part of the writing of the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah,
you said Robinson Crusoe was that way.
Robinson Crusoe is like it's straight up preachy at times, but what we've been talking about reminds me of what Richard Dawkins recently said. He's a famous atheist, but he recently said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, yes, I'm an atheist, but I still want to live in a Christian society.
Yeah.
You know, and the reality is we don't really know what an atheist society would look like. Maybe we do. We could look at historical precedent for it, but atheism and unbelief may have its time in the sun in our day and age, but like still we live in a thoroughly Christian society just in terms of our morals and the way we look at the world. And I don't think people have really given thought to what it would look like if that influence were to go away entirely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right, I think I took us on a rabbit trail that wasn't directly related to our topic, but still fun.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
My voice is already getting tired.
Mine too. Let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody.
All right, well, thanks, everybody, for listening today. Hopefully that gives you plenty of ideas for things you'd like to read, or maybe it just inspires you to read whatever it is you're currently reading. So enjoy, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.